Welcome to Hannity. This is a Fox News alert. 2016 GOP frontrunner Donald Trump canceled a campaign rally in Chicago earlier tonight amid security concerns. Now, this after violent agitators hijacked what was to be a peaceful campaign rally. Joining us now on the phone with the very latest is Donald Trump himself. Mr. Trump, thank you for being with us. I know this is probably a tough night for you. Walk us through from your end what you heard and how you made this decision.
Well, I came to Chicago a few hours ago, Sean, and we have a tremendous group of people and real supporters, amazing people. We had 25,000. We had more than 25,000, and it was going to be an incredible event. And we started to notice that all of a sudden, almost simultaneously, almost like, at a certain time, a lot of protesters showed up. And I guess it was a very staged thing with this Move On organization, which is not a good group of people from what everybody tells me. But so we had a lot of protesters come in, and they seemed to be very disruptive, and they were going into the arena, which was starting to fill up with the people that were coming. And we met with the security, we met with law enforcement, who did, I think, a terrific job. And they really told me it would be best not to go in and do the speech, because if I made the speech, it probably had mixed into the, this very large arena that seats, I guess, about 10 or 12,000 people. We would have had about 15,000 people outside who may have clashed with the people that were standing outside or the protesters. But they said it would be good not to be doing the speech because you would have had clashes and people could have been hurt or worse. And I think, and we've been given credit for this, hopefully we did the right thing, but I think that, frankly, canceling turned out to be a very good decision, because we'll do it another time, probably another place, but we'll do it another time. But we had this tremendous group of supporters come in, and it was so sad to tell them, and they were very sad that they weren't able to see what we were going to do. We're going to have a great rally. And I will say this, stopping our First Amendment rights. I have the right to speak, and they have the right to hear and listen. And we were unable to do that for security reasons, I've said. And it was my decision. I said, look, I don't want anybody to be hurt. We want this to be a nonviolent situation. And I will tell you, the people that I had, the supporters were very angry. They're angry to start off with at what's happening to the country, with the jobs going to other countries, with the horrible situation that we have at the border. I mean, everything we have, nothing works anymore. Nothing in our country works anymore. And they're angry people. And you know what? They're not really angry about just about anything else. They're very secure in themselves, but they are very angry about what's happening with our country. And so on top of everything else, they don't even have the right to go into a pavilion and have a 1-hour rally. They're stopped by what took place today, which is really a very organized group of people that does this pretty consistently to different groups of people.
Mr. Trump, we have statements that actually prove this fact, and we've been watching our own coverage here on Fox, and some people are with Bernie Sanders. MoveOn.org put out a statement that Mr. Trump, Republican leaders who support him, his hate-filled rhetoric, should be put on notice after tonight's events. They actually said that these protests are a direct result of violence that occurs at Trump rallies. Well, I don't see any violence at Trump rallies. And I've been watching and flipping the dial tonight, and somehow people have been trying to flip this on you, some of your competitors, and frankly, some pretty ignorant so-called journalists have been trying to do the same thing, as if you stating your political opinions is responsible for this. And I want to give you a chance to respond to that. We have seen a lot of this before you even got in this race in Ferguson and Baltimore. The murder rate in the city of Chicago was a national disgrace. What is your reaction to that?
Well, I've had many rallies, and we have massive rallies, by far the biggest, much, much bigger than Bernie by, a factor of many times. I mean, we have a couple of weeks ago, we had 35,000 in Alabama. We have 25,000 routinely. And we don't have problems. We have some protesters. Every once in a while, somebody will stand up. Today, we had a little more than normal in St. Louis in the morning. We had a number of people standing up, and it was fine. Nobody got hurt, but, they had to get taken out. And they're disruptive, and we do the best we can do a little creative, have a little bit of fun with them. They're out there protesting. I don't know if they're having fun doing it, frankly, but we're very conscious of it, and we're very conscious of the fact that we don't want anybody to be hurt. So today we had a little bit more than normal in St. Louis, but it was really a great rally. Tremendous turnout, and I mean thousands of people out on the street that couldn't get into a very, very large auditorium. And then I came to Chicago, and we're going to have so many people, at least 25,000. Many people would have to be outside, and we were able to cancel a lot of the people that were coming that hadn't been there yet, that hadn't come there yet, because I got here a little bit early. I'm in Chicago right now, and I was able to figure it out. And again, we're getting a lot of credit for canceling, because had I gone there, it would have been in many respects easier to just go there. But I think had I gone there, you would have had a lot of problems, because this was a very organized group, and I think not a good group, that really stifled the First Amendment rights. And it's interesting, if we ever did that to them, it would be a national disgrace, a national story, and the likes of which you've never seen. But when they do it to us, it's a very big deal. So we have, these incredible people that unfortunately were shut out from hearing what they wanted to hear.
This is not uncommon, Mr. Trump, that supposedly we're supposed to have free speech on college campuses. This happens only to conservative speakers on a fairly regular basis here. You see the violence in the city of Chicago. It seems like there are no solutions to the violence. I mean, we've had weekends with 12, 13, 14 people are shot, including young children. It is a city that seems really out of control, almost like New York before Rudy Giuliani took over.
Yeah. Well, it's a problem. There's no question about it. And it's a great city. I love Chicago. I have big investments in Chicago, and I think it's a great city. But it certainly has certain sections where it's got problems like probably almost no other place in this country. But Chicago is Chicago, and it's, an amazing place. And I do like Chicago. It's a city that I think is highly underrated, actually. But, and they hear about some of the statistics, and that's a shame. That's a horrible shame. And it's too bad they aren't able to do something about it. But this was, I think, very unrelated to that. This was an organized group. They knew that we were going to have thousands of people coming. And these are people that just wanted to listen. The theme is Make America Great Again. And they wanted to listen about making America great again, how we're going to do it. We're going to bring back our jobs. We're going to bring back so many different things to the country that we haven't had. We're going to strengthen our borders. We're going to build the wall. We're going to do so many things, and things that are positive for the country, not negative for the country. But it's all about making America great again, and maybe they just don't want to have that happen. I don't know. But I think I will say this, Sean. I think we did the right thing. If we would have gone further, I think you could have seen. They've had some pretty bad situations dating back all the way to 1968. The Democrat convention was, a disaster. People killed and lots of things happening. And tonight, virtually nobody is even hurt. And we made a very good decision. We've been given credit for making a very good decision, and we worked very, very closely with law enforcement, and they gave us some really good advice.
Let me talk about a double standard, because I watched and I listened tonight, and people said, well, Neil, they quoted you from saying, I assumed it was joking, well, in the old days, we wouldn't take that sort of thing. But they never seem to pay attention to some of the rhetoric of the president. The president has said Republicans want dirty air and dirty water. He talked about the police, the Cambridge Police acted stupidly. He said there's a long history in this country of African Americans and Latinos being stopped by law enforcement disproportionately. Every election year, the narrative of the Democratic Party against Republicans is that they are racist against black Americans, Hispanic Americans, against gay Americans, that they want dirty air and water, that they want to throw Granny over the cliff. Nobody that I heard tonight trying to blame you for the actions of others has ever been critical of the constant, predictable rhetoric, almost the playbook of the Democratic Party. I've asked you in past interviews, how do you deal with this double standard? How do you deal with that predictable playbook of attacks that you would face if you're the nominee?
Well, there is a double standard, and you know that may be better than almost anybody, but there's an unbelievable double standard. And sometimes I'll speak to young people and the children of young people, and they'll say, could you speak to, I do it for friends. I'll speak to their children. And honestly, it's a lot easier for people in life to be a liberal Democrat, okay? But if you don't believe in that, you can't do it. And you have a double standard like nobody can believe. If this rally, if conservatives and Republicans ever did that to a liberal rally, it would be a national disgrace. It would be all over every paper for weeks. And you can imagine if that ever happened. But with this, it's almost routine. You see this happening all the time. It's like routine, and it's very unfair. I agree with you.
Let me ask this, and it's a question that I have asked you a number of times on the campaign. Since the president has gotten into office, millions and millions more Americans are in poverty, millions more on food stamps, millions more out of the labor force. He will accumulate more debt than every other president combined by the time he leaves office. The economic situation is as bad as you described. How much do you think this has created anger in the country, and maybe they're just lashing out in this particular instance because you're such a high-profile candidate?
Well, it's tremendous. I mean, first of all, there's tremendous division in the country. If you look at African-American youth, young African-Americans, 59%, 59% is inconceivable. It's inconceivable. 59% unemployment rate. And you look at even African-Americans in their prime, 30, 40, 50, the unemployment rate is very high. And, we have an African-American president, and you would have thought that he would have done a much better job for African-American citizens of this country. And he hasn't. And I will, because I'm going to bring back jobs from China. I'm going to bring back jobs from Mexico and so many other places that are just ripping this country apart. Our country's being ripped apart. And let me tell you, this is largely an economic issue, too. You know that workers, hard-working people, middle-class people, haven't had a salary increase effectively in 12 years, all right? So for 12 years, they're making less now in many cases than they made 12 years ago. And it's ridiculous. And there's a lot of anger. There's a lot of anxiety. But there really is a lot of anger from people that are not angry people. And you get everybody together, and you get them in a city like Chicago, and which again is a good city. It's a good city. It's potentially a great city. And a friend of mine who's a very successful guy always found Chicago to be his favorite city. So you get them in a place like Chicago, and a thing like this shouldn't happen, especially to 25,000 people we had coming to this, John, and we were able to stop many of them from coming. Fortunately, it's the wonderful thing about the internet. But we were able to stop many, many people from coming, or it would have been really a mess. And then you don't know what would have happened. But we were able to do it early enough. And the early cancellation and the cancellation was just turned out to be a very good move, because now things are just about cleared up, and, there's been no damage.
What do you say to all those people that in many ways feel that frustration? When I give out statistics, Mr. Trump, and I say, 95 million Americans out of the labor force, 50 million in poverty, 46 million on food stamps, we've doubled our debt, median income down. I know it sounds like a statistic, but these are real people, real lives, real suffering, unnecessarily. It seems to get worse every year, not better. What do you say to those people that maybe are left behind, maybe struggling, feeling the anger, feeling the angst, feeling hopeless maybe in many ways, that might be, drawn into these groups that seem to have agendas? In this case, it was obviously a political agenda.
Sean, you know what I say? I say vote for Trump. Vote for Trump. We're going to do a lot of things that are going to make this country much better. We're going to do tremendous things. And one of the things we're going to do is bring back our jobs and bring back our industry, because it's been ripped from this country. It's just been ripped right out of the country. 50,000 manufacturing plants and businesses out of, just taken like nothing, with all the job losses. You take a look at right now, Pfizer is leaving the United States. Carrier is moving to Mexico. Ford is moving its big plants to Mexico. Nabisco is moving its big plants from Chicago into Mexico, and all the jobs lost. And people are disgusted. They're disgusted with their politicians. They're disgusted with our trade deals. They're disgusted with the fact that our military can't even beat ISIS. Can you imagine telling General George Patton we can't beat ISIS? He'd beat ISIS in 2 days. I mean, can you imagine these people, General MacArthur, General Patton, they'd be spinning in their grave right now. They wouldn't believe it. But,
Yeah.
you know, we can't beat ISIS. We can't do anything. We can't take care of our vets. We can't have good health care. Obamacare is a disaster. It's got to be repealed. It's got to be repealed and replaced. We can't get education locally. We have this horrible Common Core, which is a disgrace, where people are making a lot of money from Washington, and they don't care about the people of Ohio. They don't care about the people of any place you want to mention. I mean, they don't care. I mean, you have some probably do, but for the most part, they care about how much money they're making, and education has to be. So we can't, Sean. We don't win at anything anymore. This country doesn't win at anything, and that's why you have so many people coming to my rallies, and that's why you have a great anger. There's no question about it.
You know, I've never understood the mindset, and I was watching Marco Rubio, who was on before you came on, and he quoted you saying, quote, well, in the good old days, we would handle protesters this way. And I'm thinking, I've never blamed words for inspiring people to hate. It seems like maybe some of your opponents are jumping on this to try and capitalize on it politically. What is your answer to them?
Well, I don't know. I was just asked, will you get more votes or less votes? I have no idea. Certainly this would not have been done. I did this for security reasons. I don't want to see people get hurt. But is this good? And some people, I was watching one of the networks tonight, and they said this must have been planned by Trump. And believe me, it wasn't. Believe me, it wasn't. But this must have been planned.
The commentary is so over the top and so outrageous and so dead wrong. I mean, when did we start blaming victims of violence instead of the perpetrators of violence? There's no words that inspire people to hate. Yeah,
but when little Marco goes and starts saying what he said about this, it's a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing to say because look, I do say, years ago it wouldn't have been put up with. We have some protesters. We've had very little, relatively speaking, protests. When we have 25,000, 30,000 people in an arena and we have 2 or 3 people stand up or 5 people. Actually, today was probably one of the biggest in St. Louis. We had a number of people, but we got through it. It was fine. It was just one of those things.
About
Nobody
30
got hurt.
people, right? Yeah.
Yeah, they were it was very mild. They were taken out. The police did a fantastic job. Police in our country have to be given much more credit than they're getting because they are not being properly recognized, in my opinion. I mean, between the police and the vets, you have 2 groups that are not being properly recognized. But, we have very, very little. I will tell you, though, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when we take people out today, the police don't even touch them. They don't want to touch them because they'll end up losing their pension, losing their job, destroying their life. It's brutal today. So it's a very hard thing. And I do say, in the old days, they wouldn't have put up with it like they do right now. They wouldn't have put up with a protester standing up in the middle of a speech in front of thousands and thousands of people and screaming at the top of his or her lungs. And then also, in some cases, being very violent, throwing punches. And then when the people surrounding this person, people that are getting hit, start throwing punches the other way, the story of the next day is how violent the room was, as opposed to this particular protester or protesters that actually were causing the problem. And I see it because I'm making a speech. I'm on high, I'm on the platform, and I'm able to see it. And I see some people that are really, bad. They're bad dudes, and they're throwing punches. And when the punches are thrown back, it's always their fault. It's always the person, the supporter. It's always their fault. It's so unfair. It's so unfair. And I see it all the time. But we've had very, very little problem. And we've actually, relatively speaking, for the amount of people, for the tens of thousands of people that go to every event, we've had very, very little problem.
Now, MoveOn.org, there seem to be threatening that this is going to go on at future events, Mr. Trump. And I want to remind our audience here that MoveOn.org endorsed Bernie Sanders by a vote in January 2016, and they had a record-setting 7-point 78.6% of 340,000 votes supporting Bernie Sanders, and yet they're responsible for creating this havoc and shutting this event down, and I would even argue putting innocent people's lives in jeopardy. There were women and children at your event. I saw them there. They had to see all this tonight. You know, where's the media asking Bernie Sanders, why are your supporters doing this? Some people even went on Fox cameras tonight and said they support Bernie Sanders. They wanted only Bernie Sanders' voice heard on tape. Everyone in the media will ask you, who's going to ask Bernie Sanders, considering this is the group that has openly endorsed and supported him? Will he condemn it? Will Hillary condemn it? Is that a fair question?
Well, I remember when Bernie Sanders, his microphone was taken away from him by the two young ladies that were in attendance, and they went up and started screaming in his face, and they took away his microphone, and he walked back like a little baby from the microphone. I remember that very vividly. I thought it was disgraceful, actually, that it was allowed to happen. But look, whoever this group is, it was an organized group. And at some point, you know, people are going to get fed up with it. Let me just tell you, Sean, at some point, we had people waiting in line for 5 and 6 and 7 hours to get in. And then they get in and they get shut out, and they get, you know, what you're talking about, right of free speech and all of the other things that we're talking, you know, that we all know. It's so unfair. But you had people that got here at 11 o'clock and 10 o'clock in the morning, waited all day, and then they get protesters. And the protesters all showed up pretty much at the same time, so it was totally organized. They didn't just drift in. They just, boom, all of a sudden showed up. So, you know, at some point, they won't get away with this stuff because it's going to be end up being a much different situation. I will say this. I have such great love and respect for these people that have been so supportive. Their courage, they were so nice tonight, you know, to wait hours and hours to get in, and then to be told we're going to postpone it, and to leave, and there was no violence, essentially no violence. I have such great respect for them.
The MoveOn.org people supported this. You know, in the course of this campaign, it's obvious you have taken on the issue of securing America's borders and building a wall on the border because of drugs and the crime that is associated with it, the cost to our educational, healthcare system, our criminal justice system. Obviously controversial, I guess, in the minds of some. To me, it just makes common sense. I know to a lot of conservatives, it's common sense. And also, like I was watching you last night during the debate, you know, here we have a country like Saudi Arabia that doesn't let women drive. Women can't go to work and school without their husband's permission. They can't leave the house without a male relative. And yet we act like they're a close friend and ally. And you were talking about a major cultural divide with Islam. Now, I think this is a conversation America needs to have. Do you think that a lot of the backlash from these radical leftist groups are maybe associated with these positions that you seem to be willing to take that others maybe don't have the courage to take?
Yeah, I do. I think they're associated with the strong border. I mean, I want to have a strong border. We have to have it. Otherwise, we don't have a country. We have drugs pouring in. We have crime pouring in. We have, you know, a lack of economic development because of it. We hurt our job picture, which are desperately needed. So, you know, there are a lot of reasons for it. There's also just a total disrespect for the law. You look at what happens. I mean, it's a total disrespect for the law. And they have to be careful because things like this and incidents like this, you know, countries build up great anxiety and they build up something that can be very combustible, and that would be a terrible thing. And that's what I didn't want to see tonight. I mean, when I flew in, I was 2 hours early, and I flew in and I said, I met with law enforcement and they discussed, and they were totally prepared to go through it. And they said it'll be actually hard getting in and could be even harder getting out. And I said, what do you recommend? They said, this could be a real mess if the people clash. And I didn't want to see people get hurt. At the same time, I think it's really unfair to those great people that spent all day waiting in line to get in, and now they end up going home empty-handed. I don't like it.
Now, did law enforcement recommend this to you as well? You have Secret Service protection.
Yeah, they did. They recommended it. They did strongly recommend it, and I understood it. I understood exactly what they said. They're very professional. The law enforcement, I think, did a great job because, you know, you could see it. Had this gone forward, that was a staged deal by MoveOn or whoever might be doing it, but that was a stage deal. Had this gone forward, there would have been tremendous clashes, and a lot of people would have been hurt. So, and now I see the streets are empty. I know I'm watching your show, and it looks like you have a picture from much earlier.
We do. We have a picture from earlier.
The streets are now empty.
If they continue this, Mr. Trump, at future events, what is have you thought about how do you all these people are willing to come out to your event? I think you're right. They have a right to hear your voice. But if this is going to be an organized, ongoing...
I actually think we'll get more people because these people don't want to just take this kind of stuff, Sean. They don't want to take it. They're tired of it. This is one of the reasons that there is such a huge number of people leaving the Democrat Party and coming and voting for Trump. I mean, they come to vote for Donald Trump because we're not going to take it. I mean, it's just the country is going to hell. We're very divided. We're very, very divided. We have a president who's a very divisive guy, and frankly, this is what it is. And this is, believe it, this is an Obama situation too. He has caused tremendous division in this country. He is I call him the great divider. And we're going to unify the country. It's going to be tough, but we're going to unify the country. But right now, we have a very, very divided country.
How do you, I think you raise a good question. How do we unify the country? How do we get, because it is divided. People are suffering. These are real problems. These aren't made-up problems. As I said, millions and millions of people really suffering. Government has hurt them. They're not helping them. The violence in Chicago, the murder rate in Chicago, the fact that it hasn't been dealt with is a national disgrace in many ways to me. But how do you bring these disparate views and parties together? How does that happen? Is that something
you need? Lots of things. You need education, you need programs, but you also need jobs. We're going to create jobs. Our jobs are being stripped out of our country. They're being taken out of our country. And when people go out and they just literally, they look for a job for 4 or 5 months, they can't find one. They give up. Now they're considered employed. The numbers are phony. These are all phony numbers. These were numbers given to politicians so they look good. But these are phony numbers. So it's a very complicated situation, but it's a situation that if I become president, I will solve it. But it really does also begin and end with jobs. We have to bring jobs back in. When you hear 59%, 59% African-American youth unemployed, I mean, much more than half don't have jobs. They can't get jobs. And, now it's educational, it's programs, but it's really, we've got to get jobs. People, they become educated and they work hard, and then after they graduate, they come out and they can't get a job. And they give up.
You're saying something that I have often said, and I think this is a really important point. I was 8 years old, I had a paper route. I was 12 years old, I was a dishwasher. I was 13, I was a cook. I was 14, I was a busboy. I was 15, I was a waiter. I was 17, I was a bartender. And if I didn't have those summer jobs, I got in enough trouble having jobs. For all these kids that have zero opportunity in the summer, I know what it would have meant for me growing up. It would have meant me being out with my friends and me getting in even more trouble. And you're right, these kids don't have a chance, they don't have an opportunity. That gets back to the issue of immigration. You have more competition for limited jobs, especially low-skilled labor. Add to that lower wages if you do get a job. That ends in economic hardship for people. I mean, I think the economic component cannot be ignored in the anger that exists in this country. I think that's a good point.
Well, it is a good point, and it's a point that we have to understand, and we have to bring things back to our country. We have to go back and just, bring it back to better than it ever was. We can make it better than it ever was. We're going to make the country better. I say, make America great again. And I'm adding now, because I've seen the people of this country, they're incredible. We're going to say better than ever before. We can make this country better than ever before. But we have horrible leadership. We make a deal with Iran where we give them $150 billion, and they're a terrorist state. And now they're buying missiles and testing missiles, and they're not supposed to even do that. So the whole thing is ridiculous, Sean. But I'm very happy in the decision we made tonight. And there's been very, very little damage done. And most importantly, there's essentially been nobody even hurt. And I think if we would have made the wrong decision tonight, could have been something that would have been very bad. And everybody's very happy with what we did and how it's come out.
It's very interesting. I'm hearing a very different side of you. I've known you for over 15 years now, and I sense a real pain in there about how bad things are. Do you think maybe you communicate that enough to people that your campaign is about people?
Well, my campaign is about people. It's about making people better, getting people higher wages, getting them better jobs, getting them better education, getting them better health care, strengthening our military so they can keep all those things. Because if we don't have the right military, they're not going to keep all the things I just mentioned. And, you know, I mean, we are in a very perilous position. Our military is in very, very bad shape. Physically, the equipment we have is old. The enemy has better equipment because they take it off the people we give it to. We have allies in the Middle East. We give them military equipment. The enemy takes it away. Mm-hmm. The enemy has better equipment than we do. A friend of mine has a son who's over there, and he's over in Iraq. And he says it's so disconcerting to see that the enemy has our equipment, brand new, and they're using old stuff. The enemy has better equipment than we do. He always tells me that young guy, fantastic guy, when I see him, he always says the enemy has better equipment than they do. They have the Humvees that were sent over, hundreds of them, that are totally armor-plated.
All right, Mr.
And
Trump.
Our guys don't have it because they took it from the enemy. Well, they took it from people that we gave it to, and they were supposed to be our allies. But the bullet was fired in the air, Sean, and our allies ran. And these characters, these horrible characters that cut off people's heads and drown them in cages, they took the equipment. So they have better equipment than we do, Sean. People are tired of it. They're tired of seeing the stupidity. And with me, they're not going to get the stupidity. They're going to get something much different.
And by the way, for the record, you were going to be on camera with us tonight, but at the advice of Secret Service and others, they asked you not to. Is that correct?
Well, I think they probably felt that it would be better not to. But, you know, look, I think we can communicate just as well this way. Otherwise, I would have done it.
All right, Mr. Trump, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Okay.
And
thank you.